Good morning, everybody. My name is Charles Allen. I am a DC council member, and this year I'm also the chair of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Paul Smedberg and I are the co-chairs of the DMVMoves project. We've been spending so much time together that we didn't even talk this morning, but we basically wore the same tie. But Randy, thank you so much for walking through and getting what I think is everybody excited about where we have to go. And I think as we heard the general manager talk about the great work that has been happening at WMATA over this last year, ridership continues to grow incredibly strong. Customer satisfaction is at an all-time high. Public safety continues to improve. It is a bus and a rail system that is serving our region very, very well. It has continued to be on the upswing. But it also, as the general manager talked about, it is fragile, I would say. That as we see this crisis coming, as we see the funding and the challenges ahead of us, it also creates an opportunity. And that's what our DMVMoves process and project is all about. It is a regional partnership and coalition of elected leaders, of transit leaders, of operators, to help think through how we meet this moment and how do we put our region in the best position to be able to tackle what we see in front of us. If we know it is going to cost $600 million to be able to maintain the level of service that is serving our region very well as continue to grow where it's got to go, that's a challenge. And I think as a region, we can meet it. We've done it before. As a region, we have met these challenges before. It is time for us to do it again. And it's time for us to do it in a way that we don't find ourselves back in 4 or 5 years scrambling for the next crisis and just bounce from crisis to crisis. And I think that's the challenge we certainly feel as the opportunity presents itself as a region to really think about how to create all those efficiencies talked about. How do we bring all of this together? Some of it is around optimizing the services and delivery and transit that we have. Some of it is around thinking about the future, where we're going to go. My challenge to everybody here, my ask of everybody here, if you are a business leader, if you are an employer, if you are a part of this conversation happening across the region, we need you to lift your voice up and speak more strongly about why this is so important. It is so much more than just about public transit. Our metro system and our entire transit system is what moves our region economically. It is what moves people with our jobs. It is what moves the millions of visitors that come to our region. It is what is driving our economy. I really implore you to think about this as an economic investment in our entire region to make sure that our transit system, which obviously WMATA is a major part of, but I would say it is broader than that, and that gets that unified vision. Our very big ask for you is to help raise your voice, push on us, push on your local leaders, push on the Council of Governments, on WMATA, on all of us, to really help deliver what it is we need, but we need your voice to really speak up and talk about why this is so important and why you see this as part of the growing economy of our entire region. It's something that I'm very proud of working on this past year. I think we met a big moment last year with the collaboration with Paul Smedberg, who is a great friend and a leader, and as a co-chair, we've really worked hard to help foster and bring this group together. So I want to turn it over to my co-chair, Paul Smedberg, to help share a little about, as well, the continued progress and the work that we're making happen here.
Thank you, Council Member, and good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg. I'm Vice Chair of the WMATA Board and Co-Chair with Council Member Allen of the DMVMoves Taskforce. I want to take this moment to introduce my fellow WMATA Task Force members, Dr. Lowe from the District of Columbia, Sarah Klein, who is our federal government representative on the board, and MDOT Assistant Secretary Joe McAndrew. And thank you for being here for this truly important conversation. I want to emphasize something again that we heard in part of Randy's presentation here today, and the important role that Metro plays in our economy. $9.4 billion in business output and economic activity is supported by transit. $330 billion total value of property within Metro station areas, and $3.2 billion in tax revenue generated by Metro station areas. It also connects our airports, Mark to VWI. I see Mr. Potter here from National and Dulles. So this is an important system and an economic driver, and it's the one thing that brings this entire region together. To help drive this work, the task force created the Community Partners Advisory Group, chaired by the Greater Washington Board of Trade CEO Jack McDougle, and the Government Partners Advisory Group, chaired by Fairfax County Executive Bryan Hill. These groups have been meeting monthly to discuss the needs of our transit system, funding, priorities, and potential paths forward. I want to emphasize something the council member said. This is an unprecedented chance to propel our region forward by creating a comprehensive, unified plan for transportation in this region. From putting WMATA on stable financial footing to realigning the rider experience and use, no matter what system they're using. And we have to make the appeal to you. You are the leaders in this region, and as Ms. Hollinger said in the beginning, your voice is so important in this debate. We need to hear from you. We can't just hear from our customers. We need to hear from you, and we're also working with our political leaders in the region, many of whom are on the task force. Now we'll hear from the advisory group chairs, along with the DMVMoves staff consultant Nick Donohue, on the progress so far and expected outcomes and next steps. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Is this coming through? Yeah. You know, Chef said he was going to play a trick on me. He just didn't tell me what it was going to be this morning. We're going to try to. Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me also? So it was clearly operator error. You'll get a little bit more of that from me this morning, so don't worry. First of all, I just want to thank you all for coming out this morning and being here with us. My name is Nick Donohue. I'm the facilitator of the DMVMoves initiative. I'm here with Jack McDougle and Bryan Hill, and we're going to talk about what's happening with DMVMoves, what we've been finding about, what we've been talking, and what are some kind of the key things as we move forward. This morning, we've really heard how transit is critical. Shouldn't have that sausage. How transit is critical to the economic competitiveness of this region. We've heard from the business community. We heard from government officials. We don't often hear government and business agree on things. And so we have to know there's some truth to the importance of transit for this region when we hear different stakeholders with very, very different perspectives saying the same thing and talking about the importance of transit. Randy's telling me that the mic is not close enough. We're here today to talk about some of the important needs that transit in this region has. The GM laid out the big needs about WMATA, but I want to stress this isn't just a WMATA issue. We also have other transit systems in this region that have significant needs. It's also not just a DMV issue. This is a national problem that transit agencies are facing across the country for a number of reasons. One of the biggest reasons, again, is obviously the COVID pandemic, its impact on ridership, but also its impact on cost. We've seen significant inflation, changes in work patterns, and a whole host of other things that have impacted the transit systems throughout the country. So you go to LA, you go to Philly, you go to Boston, you go to San Francisco, they're having this exact same discussion. So this isn't like 2018 when we were here in the DMV region, and it was a WMATA kind of only topic, and you weren't seeing the same types of discussions in these other major metro areas. This is happening across the country. And the good news is some of the things that have led to these impacts are starting to be addressed. The GM talked about the zero budget growth, how ridership is returning. We're now at pre-pandemic levels on the bus. We're having healthy rail ridership recovery. So we're on our way back. But this region also has other things that are compounding the challenges to our regional transit system that we're going to talk about as well. And Randy hit on some of those, particularly for WMATA when it deals with the 2018 funding and the PRIA. Sources don't grow. We've been borrowing against them. We basically run out of the ability to borrow here in 2 years. That kind of sounds like an abstract thing when I say that. Like, well, what does that mean? Okay, we can't borrow. So what? It's a big so what. What that actually means is basically, absent some sort of intervention, we have a 40% reduction in WMATA's capital budget. Since 2018, we've been able to bring the backlog of WMATA down from $7 billion to around $4 billion. If all of a sudden 40% of the capital budget goes away, think about what the impacts will be to the progress that we've made improving WMATA's state of good repair conditions. We also talked though about like bus priority and other needs in this region. And if you think there's 14 different transit operators in this region, if we today set up a new transit system for the DMV area, I assure you we would not set it up with 14 different operators. Yet that's where we are. And so we have challenges because we need to create a more integrated and seamless system with making these 14 operators work together, but also working for how do we get towards a regional vision. And these are some of the challenges that we're talking about at DMV Moves. And so Jack, I want to turn to you to get us kind of kicked off here. You know, DMV Moves is a task force that consists of elected officials and appointed officials. You chair an advisory group with community partners, and Bryan chairs an advisory group with business partners. What's been really the focus to date, and what are some of like the key things that we've been talking about that this group could really benefit from hearing about?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Nick and Bryan. This has been a really great experience to start to really think through a strategic vision for our transit systems. Also, Kathy, thank you for partnering with us, and thank you everybody for coming out today and engaging with us in this conversation. Let me set a little context first. You know, we have a pretty amazing region here. We're currently about 6.2 million people. We have assets that are the envy of the world. Sure, we have challenges. We have some pretty big challenges that we're grappling with. We're the 5th largest economy in the country. We're the 25th largest economy in the world between Sweden and Poland. So we've got a lot going on here. And so part of what Randy was saying too is that, you know, our desire, our aspiration to have a world-class transit system matches with what our aspirations are to be a world-class, competitive, inclusive economy. And so they really do tie together. And so I think it's really important when we set out how we're thinking about these things, to put it in some of those terms. You know, the other thing here too, one thing that we're not very proud of is that we're the 3rd most congested region in the country. That's not a good thing. You know, and for anybody that drove today, you know, maybe it was just, you know, a smooth ride in, maybe it wasn't. You know, we've run out of parking spaces in DC. So getting around this region is a challenge, and that's hindering us. That's hindering our ability to attract and retain talent. It's hindering our ability to attract and retain investment. And so as we think about how do we grow and how do we continue to invest in our quality of life, we have to think very holistically about how we're going to move people around. And so I think one of the things from our advisory committee, you know, and I've got Elizabeth here representing bikers, and for those of you who don't know, I walk to work every morning from Arlington to downtown DC. I ride Metro home. Last year I was a top 9% rider, and that's only because I walk to work, otherwise it'd be a lot higher. You know,
We'll see this year.
well, it's going to be probably even less, but you know, because there's more people riding this year, so I'm probably going to come down. So we need a very healthy, integrated system where all the parts of the system are working together and complementing one another. And so when we think of what we're talking about here too is around transit. Transit is a backbone around that. So one of the things, so two quick things to answer your question, then we'll get into some more detail. One thing that I think was pretty amazing about our advisory committee, when we first started, we were presented a draft vision for our work, and that vision was a transit system that was reliable, safe, on time, and all the traditional things that you would think. And so the diversity of participants, you know, again, we have transit advocates, we have bike, we have pedestrian advocates, we have labor, we have businesses. So we have a pretty broad mix of individuals working with us on these challenges. We all agreed that transit is more than that. Those are tactics. Those are goals that we achieve through putting an effective system in place. But what transit enables us to do as the backbone of an integrated mobility system, it allows us to achieve our equity goals. It allows us to achieve our climate goals. It allows us to tap into the best that this region has to offer. It reduces the friction in our economy. It improves our overall output. I've seen estimates that congestion in our region costs us $9 billion a year. That's money that could be put to much better use doing other things. And so when we're talking about this, we're not just talking about trains and buses. We're talking about the quality of our region and what we want our region to represent to the world. And so I do think that that's a really important message that I would like people to take away from. And we can get into some of the more details and tactics there. The other thing I want to say too, at the last task force meeting, Charles asked us, he said, what do you need? And Bryan and I were sitting there and looking at each other and it's like, we need carte blanche. We need you guys to give us, empower us to leave nothing off the table. Everything is in part of the conversation here. And so that's the direction that we've been taking our conversations. And so we will really be digging into these issues in a way that we as a region have not done in a long time. And so I was giving us maybe 50-50 starting this effort about a year ago, and I'm up now to maybe around 80-20. You want to go higher than that? 90-10? But failure's not an option. We've got to solve for this, for all the reasons that Randy pointed out, that Charles, Paul pointed out, and others are going to point out today. Failure's not an option. So we really do need to come to the table. We need to put the past behind us, and we need to start building for the future. And I know that's not going to be easy, but we're the most highly educated and skilled region in the country. We can do this.
And I think I also want to talk a little bit, thanks Jack for that. I also want to talk a little bit about, it's not just the financial issues that we've talked about when it comes to getting to a world-class transit system. We've heard a lot from some of the folks, particularly in Jack's advisory group, about they ride transit across jurisdictional boundaries. And to say they describe that as pleasant would be to mislead you. They have said that it can be confusing, sometimes the schedules aren't coordinated, different transit providers provide information in different ways. And I want to give a shout out to Ra Amin, who I'm not sure if he's here or not today, but he is on COG, he's the chair of COG, Citizen Transportation Advisory Committee. And he said, improving the ability of people to use the different transit systems in the region to travel throughout the region, beyond obviously making sure the service is running, Randy, is one of the most important things the advisory committee at COG thought could be done to help improve transit in this region. Now the irony of this is we've all identified a whole host of policies for decades that could improve transit in this region. There's been a report X, report Y, and the report comes out and then the initiative kind of ends. One of the other things Jack, Bryan, and myself are trying to do with DMVMoves is make sure that doesn't happen this time. So whether it's fair policy, whether it's wayfinding, whether it's signage, opportunities for shared services like the GM mentioned for cost efficiencies, we are actually moving those forward today while DMVMoves is in place and having those difficult conversations about, we all think this is a great idea. You all nod your head when we say this would be a good thing to happen. Why haven't we done it? And what do we need to do to make sure that it actually happens and that we move the ball forward? Because getting the funding will be very important, and that is critical, as Jack just noted, but we also have to address these other issues to create a more seamless and integrated transit system across these 14 different operators, and that's a big part of what DMVMoves is also doing.
Yeah, and thank you, Nick, and thank you, Jack, for allowing me this opportunity here. You know, as the county executive of Fairfax County, I'm looking at a holistic approach. Obviously, we commute from Fairfax all the way into Montgomery County, which means we go through the District of Columbia. The local officials and the CAOs, Chief Administrative Officers, and I meet regularly on DMVMoves clock and off of DMVMoves clock because we want to understand how we can get this all in one place and move it in a better way. The funding is an issue, obviously, because I have to report to a board of 10, who I'm going to say to them, we need X amount of dollars for Metro or for WMATA. We then have to go to the state legislature and get money from them. I just want to make sure everybody understands it's an integral piece, 3 pieces that we have to work with. Indexing the 2018 dollar amount, yeah, we wouldn't be talking about this today. We wouldn't be. We'd be talking about something else. It might be just our operational portion of WMATA. It wouldn't just be the operations and the capital, because those are 2 very distinct issues that we both need to, we have to take into account and move forward. We in Fairfax County just did a bond debt for WMATA, and I'm going to tell you, the amount of emails I get on why we're doing this is just incredible. But those are from the folks who don't take the Metro. The day I took the Metro. Most days when I go into DC, I take the Metro. But it's apparent to me that we, as the leader, with the District of Columbia as our nation's capital, Fairfax County, Prince William County, Loudoun County, Arlington County, Alexandria, the District of Columbia, my friends from Maryland, we are the icon of the capital area, region. We need to understand that we have to fund WMATA. The question is, how do we get there? And we are working very hard to get there. In my humble opinion, I'm hoping that we can come forward with something no later than January to our elected officials, because it's going to take some time. Obviously, Randy did a great job with his budget. Thank you, sir, for fiscal 26. But 27 and 28 are going to be things that we have to address. We have to address them, and it's going to take us time to get them through, at least in Commonwealth of Virginia, through the state legislature. Obviously, with our help from our Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Walter Alcorn here, he knows exactly what I'm going to be asking for in the 2026 budget. The 2027 and 28 budget is going to be very key and critical to all of our region, to the state of Maryland, to the District of Columbia, to the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's about funding and getting us to a good state of repair. When you look at our escalators, we went from $500 million in arrears to $69 million. Escalators are very important, obviously, to the way we move people around. Today, when I drove in, a gentleman got on at Dunloring, thank you, fixed the door while we were riding to Metro Center. I gave him a fist pound, told him thank you. He looked at me, what are you doing, sir? Why did you do that? I said, because you worked the system to ensure that we were all safe. And that's the system that we need.
Thanks, Bryan. And Bryan, you hit on something that I wanted to talk a little bit about, which is, what is the arc of DMV Moves, what's coming out of it, and then what kind of happens after that. So, as Bryan noted, it's our hope to have interim recommendations that will go back to the task force for their review early next year. We're hoping for January, targeting that. As the advisory groups, part of what we're doing is vetting the information, having some of the top conversations, and making sure the diverse kind of viewpoints of the various stakeholders in the region are considered there. DMV Moves will run through June. At that point, we'll really be handing this off to the elected officials. And you heard Chair Allen and Chair Smetber talk about the importance of the business community and other folks to kind of engage when we get to that stage. But I also want to talk to you just a little bit about some of the work we are doing so that you understand how we're preparing these interim recommendations. So one of the biggest questions that came up in some of the advisory groups was, okay, well, we just did a large increase for WMATA's capital funding in 2018. How do we make sure we don't go back there again? Because one of the things we kind of heard over and over is if we're going to do this, we don't want to be here again in 5 years. And I want to give a lot of credit to Randy and his team, Tom and other folks who worked on this for us. We sat down, they ran the numbers, and they demonstrated, I think, to the advisory groups that with the $340 million and the 3% indexing, we can kind of reach that place where we have a sustainable state of good repair program at WMATA. That all started with the 2018 bill, and that really got us to the point where we had a reliable state of good repair program. But because of how that and PREA were structured ultimately, those have run their course. And so we're trying to vet these things and make sure that when we structure it this time and when we put out those recommendations to the task force and others, they can understand that these will be sustainable solutions and that we're not going to have to do this again in a number of years here. And so we're really trying to answer some of those questions that are outstanding there. Jack?
Well, from an economic standpoint, guys, let's just think about this. We have the third most hotel beds on the East Coast, right here in this area. Without a good metro system, people are not going to be using our hotel beds, i.e. won't be spending cash here, won't be able to do anything here if we don't have a good transportation system. PREA needs to be addressed, as Nick said, as Randy has said. We all need to understand this is an economic vitality issue. It is just not a transportation issue.
Yeah, and just to reiterate too, part of this process has really been, pushing Randy and his team to answer a lot of the questions that we all have over the history of WMATA and our transit systems across the region to make sure that we really do understand the capital program. I would say that we have a much better understanding of that and are confident in the 340 number and moving that forward into a sustainable program. We're really digging into the operating cost structure now and understanding, as Randy pointed out earlier, understanding fixed and variable costs and what does that look like. It's likely that, what he was saying too, based on the fixed costs, there's probably a lot more service that we could provide but what does that look like, and then what additional assets, particularly, capital assets like, equipment is necessary to make that happen. How many more people do we need to get on transit for our region to be competitive? I mean, that's a key question here. And then it's not just what does Metro or WMATA or the regional transit agencies do about that, but what do the rest of us do about that? What are businesses doing? What are we doing to encourage more and more people to get on transit? With the high satisfaction rates we're seeing right now, there isn't really a reason not to be using transit. Personally, I don't like driving around looking for parking spots or sitting in traffic. So if you can get from point A to point B much quicker, then let's figure out ways to do that. Again, from a business perspective, business community perspective, let's get the maximum return on our transit investments in this region. We don't need 14 transit agencies. That's our perspective. So figure out how we can best integrate those more effectively, from a cost perspective, but also from a rider experience perspective. And then also, too, we're going to continue to push hard on Metro, but we've got to give Metro room to manage the agency. So let's make sure going forward that we have the right balance and effective governance and oversight that gives us the confidence that they are managing correctly, but that they can do their jobs for moving people around the region. So we've got a number of things that we have to tackle here in the short term. And I'm really confident, based on where we are right now, that we can take those issues on and continue to do that. Another thing, Randy, too, you started to talk about the vision of what transit needs to be. The planning departments for all the different COG jurisdictions are continuing to forecast adding between 1 and 1.5 million people to our region over the next 20 to 30 years. With remote work, with the incoming administration, there's a lot of variables to that. But we can anticipate adding more people. And so figuring out how we're going to move those people around becomes a key challenge for all of us. And so Randy, we've talked about this, going to continue to push on you guys, really help to develop what that vision looks like, and what can we do, what is achievable within the constraints that we have so that we can address some of those needs. Very optimistic about the direction that we're going in right now.
Well, so we're going to wrap up now. I really want to thank Bryan and Jack for their work sharing these advisory committees. If you kind of take something away from this discussion today, I want it to be a few things. We're bringing all the stakeholders to the table. We're bringing the government partners, we're bringing the community partners. We've had a number of meetings. We're going to continue to have those meetings. We're going to have the tough conversations. We're making real progress. A lot of things have started to be answered. There's still a few things we have to look at, particularly on the enhancement other sides of the system. But there will be more to come. You'll start to see stuff early in the new year, and your voices are really, really important as we move to the next phase of this. And DMVMoves kind of puts out those final recommendations, and the elected officials start to consider those and think about how they're going to address the transit funding needs in this region. So again, thank you for coming, and now we're done.
Thank you, everyone.